Hello, thank you for tuning in. My name is Gracie Jones, a graduate student and intern for the University of Louisville Women's Center. Today on August 1st, 2024, I'm with Trudy Butler Colvin and her granddaughter, Izzy Torres, who are here to partake in the Grandmother Power Oral History Project. The goal of this project is to give a voice to our elders, capturing their memories, experiences, and wisdom through the art of storytelling. These cherished moments not only preserve valuable history, but also create a deeper connection between generations. In this conversation, we'll hear firsthand how the bond between grandmother and grandchild shapes their lives and how the stories passed down can have a lasting impact on both young and old. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful celebration of family history and the incredible power of stories. What is your name,
Um,
pronouns, and some of your social identities apart from being a grandmother?
my name is Trudy. Full name? Yeah.
Whatever you're comfortable
Uh, Trudy Butler Colvin. Um, I am a grandmother. Have three grandchildren, two granddaughters, one grandson, and I have my first teenager here with me this morning. She just turned 13, and my children kind of got a late start, so I'm an old grandmother for young children, which I kind of love. It keeps me younger. Um, what else? I've been married for a very long time, almost 55 years. Maybe you need to nudge me a little bit. I've kind of forgotten
it's okay. So this is a question for you. So what is your name and what do you call your grandmother?
My name is Isfara, but I go by Izzy often. And I call my grandmother Mamaw. And yeah.
My daughter called my mother and daddy Mama and Papa, and she wanted her daughter to call us Mama and Papa to honor them.
So this is a question for you, Trudy. It says, how did your grandmother influence your life and values? And can you share a specific memory of her?
We were talking about that in the car. I had a really sweet grandmother. Um, I go back, I don't know, I haven't given my age, but I can. I don't have any issues with that. I'm 77, so I go back as a child, into the early and mid 50s. And my grandmother was a very sweet and kind person. She probably never traveled more than 20 miles in a radius in her entire life. She never had the opportunity. She was very talented, wonderful cook, and seamstress. And I don't use the word seamstress loosely. She could sew and make anything. Um, I remember when I was older, I bought yarn. I was going to knit an Afghan, and I was living in Memphis at the time, and I bought all this yarn, and I was totally lost. At that time, my grandmother, who had never, all the sewing she had done, but she hadn't crocheted these things. A sister-in-law of hers showed her how to do these Afghans, and of course we all just inundated her with yarn. I have it to this day. It's down in my basement. The kids sit on it, and the orange and brown one is the
That's
one.
that one?
Yes. And I called her Mammy, and she made that. And after when she finished with those, she told us. She says, "That's the end. I'm not doing any more." Um, she ended up living in a nursing home for about 3 or 4 years, and she would not participate in the sewing or the knitting or crocheting, any of that. She says, "I've done that my entire life. I came here to rest." But I was telling Isabara in the car, she was a very large woman, short, and she had arthritis, I'm sure, most of her life, which there wasn't much to do for that back in her day. So I'm sure she was in pain a lot. And I sassed her one time. I remember this so well because they repeated the story. You know how a kid does something, they repeat it. Um, she could barely get out of her rocking chair, so she would do this little number and then pop up. And I sassed at her and told her, she told me to do something, I don't know what it was. And I told her that I was going to get a switch and make her go hibbly hobbling down the road if she, did that to me again. So I'm sure she repeated that to my mother.
Yes.
But another memory, my grandmother dipped snuff, which was very common back in those days. Women didn't smoke, it wasn't accepted, but they did have their tobacco. And now we grew up in the country, and we'd sit out on her front porch. She's dipping snuff, and this is gross, but she'd spit off the side of the porch. So she saved a little snuff tin for me, and I mixed cocoa and sugar. And I had a toothpick. It was a sweet gum thing that they used to dip their snuff with. And I would dip my snuff and sit with her and spit off the porch. So it was, she was a wonderful grandmother. Even though we didn't do things like I do with my children now, I remember her cooking in her little short, fat hands.
Izzy, this is a question for you, but what is your favorite memory you have with your grandmother?
I have a lot of memories with you, but let me think. One of my probably in the spring for spring break, me, Mama, and my father went on a vacation to Ecuador, where he's from, for my cousins and stuff, and she tagged along, and it was like
she took care of me,
and it was so fun. And I remember her dancing because it was for my cousin's like quince and stuff, and like all the dancing and stuff. And I saw her dancing with some of my aunts and cousins, and like it was just so fun. And there's so many others, but that's like one of the like recent.
Most recent?
One of the most recent.
One of the most, oh.
And then, Trudy, do you have a favorite memory with
I guess she likes to spend the night with us, as my others do. As a matter of fact, I had one last night. And we like to talk in bed.
Yes.
Yeah. And she wants me to ask her questions. And then every now and then, when I'm asking her these questions, then I'll say, oh, blah, 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 when I was little or whatever. And it's like, oh, Mama, you're so old. I say, yeah, you're right. And I really, because I was raised in a rural South, West Tennessee, my life was very different from these children. But it was very good.
Yeah. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for me? To talk about maybe your upbringing and how it's different from theirs.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was raised in a small farming community in West Tennessee. My brothers still live there, as did my family until they passed away. My father lived to be 94, my mother 97. Lived a really good, long life. When I was in that community, there was only 4 or 5 families that had lived there for a very long time, and they still live there. Since that time, we called them people from up north have moved in, like the real estate world. They have these, they read, okay, 40-acre farm or 10 acres or whatever, and these people move in. So there's a lot of new blood there, which is a good thing. And but when I was growing up, there was just it was a very segregated community and time. The little schoolhouse I went to was across the field from where I lived, and I walked to school every day. I didn't live close enough to ride a bus. I mean, I lived too close to ride the bus. So we had, when I first started to school, we had 2 teachers for 8 grades. And it was a big old schoolhouse. It had been there a very long time. We had wooden stoves that heated everything, pushed the windows up in the summer for cooling. We, up through my 4th grade, we had the 2 teachers. Then the enrollment had dwindled, partly because some of the other counties that joined ours had built new elementary schools, and therefore it pulled some of our kids. But there again, we were a small community to begin with. Yeah. 5th through 8th grade, we had 1 teacher for 8 grades, and it was wonderful. We had a lunchroom. A neighbor woman, down the road, she was the cook. We she would let the older kids listen to the young kids read. I've told Isabara and Harper about Harper's my other granddaughter, about how we would write scribble stories, and I know now what that meant, but back then you didn't have a name for it. It was to practice, our hands with our pencils, and we'd write on the back of our paper. Penmanship was a really huge thing back then, and we would read our scribble stories out loud. And when we started high school, there was 3 of us from that school, and we finished high school, all 3 of us. One of our classmates was actually the valedictorian of the high school. He's very smart, still is, and we still remain friends through all we've gone ourselves. I've moved away when I was young. The others have stayed around. It was just like I said, it was very segregated. My dad, I was very fortunate. My family always owned their own home and farm. Now, that doesn't mean that we were sitting back on a big plantation, sipping iced tea on the front porch. We were not. We were just, my mother was one of the only moms that worked outside the home. She worked in a shirt factory about 7 or 8 miles away from the small town. And so I kind of raised myself as a little child, but, everybody, we were all right there together because our little house was right in the heart of the community. And we picked cotton with my black friends. I'm not proud to say that back in those days, we didn't socially get together, if that's the right word. It was just different times. They weren't necessarily bad. My dad always had friends from all manners. If someone moved into the house across the road from us that was not, it was maybe a rental home, or maybe they lived there while they were making a crop, he always went to them and introduced himself, and would say if they ever needed anything, he would be there. But he didn't necessarily go into their homes and blah, blah, blah. Right. And, in those times, it wasn't as accepted. Right. I can remember one of my vivid memories was one year my dad, a black family, they sharecropped with us. And it was small. I mean, we had maybe 20 acres of cotton, which is very small. And when we were picking cotton, we all picked together. And there was a big family of them. And I just had a ball with them, I just, we talked, we played, we just had a good time with each other. But that was where it ended. At school, they had their school, we had ours. It wasn't until the year after I graduated high school, I graduated in '65. The following year, the schools were integrated. So, it's, I don't think that was totally bad. It was not, but by that I mean, we didn't have the hatred that I feel like there's right. Some of that. I think diversity is a good thing because we need it. But just because of the timing, it was there. Right.
And how did you get to Louisville? Like, how did you?
Oh, goodness.
Can you talk about what caused you to leave home?
Well, when I was in high school, I went to Nashville for business school. Computers had just become the thing then, and there was a business school close by, but this man came down and recruited us little country bumpkins, you know, and a couple of us went to Nashville together, and I still stay in touch with her. The computer part didn't take on me, but I did live there and learned the shorthand and typing and all that. The premise for getting us up there is that he would provide us with a part-time job so that it wouldn't cost my family the room and board. And we lived in a boarding house in Nashville. And I had a little part-time job, which doesn't really matter. That's what took me to Memphis, though, this part-time job. They opened up a little, it was financial office. Of course, we called it Atlas Finance back in those days. And he opened an office in Memphis. This was actually before credit cards were around.
Yeah.
So the purpose for this place was for people that needed to borrow money between paycheck to paycheck. And the largest loan we made was $100, $120. Of that, you received $98.20. The rest of it was charges. They couldn't call it interest, they called it other things. And it was an interesting little job. And while I was there, again, living in a boarding house, the women lived with the lady that owned the house, and across the driveway, she had a really large home, excuse me, where her men and boys stayed. And I do mean they ranged in age from probably 20 to, God, I don't know, in their 50s, because we had some men that lived there that did construction work, and they would live there during the week. And that's how I ended up in Memphis. And my husband, he was co-oping through the University of Tennessee at Martin, and he was co-oping with Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. He would go to school a quarter and work a quarter, and I met him at the boarding house. And then when he graduated, we got married. We lived in Memphis for about 9 years. Moved to Perry, Georgia, which was a wonderful move. I'd never moved that far away from home before, but I decided, I had a long talk with myself, and it was like, you know, you're doing this, it's going to work, blah, blah, blah. We met some wonderful people there because Perry at that time, he worked for Pabst Brewing Company, and they had moved in about 4 families. Procter & Gamble was building a big pulp mill in Oglethorpe, Georgia. And because of that being a tiny, tiny little place, Perry was very small, it was their engineering and startup crew that had moved down from Cincinnati to start this place. They all moved into Perry. So we moved in with just an influx of new people. It was wonderful. I'd never met people from anywhere other than Mississippi or Arkansas or Tennessee. It was amazing to meet these people from Milwaukee and Ohio and wherever, Rhode Island. So we loved it. We lived there for 8 years, and then because of his work, we moved here. And then during all that time, I hadn't worked. I stayed home with the kids and did that kind of stuff. So when we moved here, for my mental health, I got a part-time job at one of the banks. Worked for 5 years as a part-time bank teller, met wonderful people. After that, I worked full-time for that bank for 15 years. Then I moved to a smaller bank and worked there for 12. And I would probably still be working 2 days a week if it hadn't have been for COVID.
I remember.
Yeah, and my kids just said, no, Mom, you cannot go back to work. And plus, I'm more available for my grandkids now.
Right. So, thank you for sharing. I think this would be fun.
I overshare, sorry.
No, this is perfect. This is not part of my questions, but maybe to have her guess the prices of things back then.
If I can even remember.
Yeah, or a rough estimate, like the movies, for instance, cost of a movie ticket.
Oh, I have no idea. I really don't. It was so and even then, I couldn't afford to do it. When I moved to Nashville to go to school, my friend and I had a little part-time job, but our room and board was $12.50 a week. that gives you an idea.
Yeah.
And it was room and board. You know, we had 2 meals a day. We had lived with this family. Her husband was deceased, so that was her, and that's the way how she supported her family. And every morning we went into her kitchen and she fixed our breakfast. In the evenings we ate in her dining room, and every Monday it was this, Tuesday, da da da. On the weekends she didn't prepare a big meal, but I think we got breakfast there. Anyway, we didn't have, I didn't have any extra money. We just didn't. We would go to after the I always wanted to go to the Grand Ole Opry. After the Grand Ole Opry, the Ernest Tubb Record Show has a free, you could go there in the record store and listen to the performer that whoever had hosted like the Grand Ole Opry that night. They would come to the record store, and if Ernest Tubb was out of town, this is so archaic, they would be the host, and we would go there because it was free. Mm-hmm. Even moving to Memphis, having a real job there, I didn't have a lot of money to spend. You just didn't do what you do now. You just sat on the porch and talked, and you walked to places, and we didn't have a car for a while. Got one later.
Walk and walk and walk.
Yeah.
Love walking.
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that?
And then in the town, in the city now, I look back where I lived, and I had no idea. I rode a bus. We rode the bus, city bus, because I worked downtown Memphis. And when I lived in Nashville, we rode the bus. You want to hear a funny story about a Nashville bus? You've heard about the green and white?
Have I heard this story?
Yeah. When I first moved there, the big requirement was they would get us a part-time job. So they got me a part-time job at McClellan's. It was like Woolworths. And I won't even go there about that story, but I was leaving work the first day. And prior to that, my friend and I got off the bus at the same place near the school where we went. And so I was familiar with that. So that particular day, here I am in a whole different part of downtown Nashville, and I'm coming down the sidewalk, and I see this bus, and I run to get on it. I have to have my footstep to go in, and I hear this voice says, "Don't get on that bus." I turn around, I said, "What?" And it was one of the girls that lived at the boarding house. She says, "Don't get on that bus." And I said, "But it's green and white." She said, "They're all green and white. You want on the granny white." Oh, okay. So I don't know where I would have ended up that day if she hadn't been standing there. So that taught me a lesson too.
Mama and you have very different bus knowledge.
Yes, you do. You can tell about your mom.
My mom loves the bus. She rides the bus everywhere to work.
Currently.
Okay, like right now she loves it because she does not like driving whatsoever, and so it's just like she just likes it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really like the bus because I like being.
She takes us on the bus excursions.
I just like being like in like my own car, just with people I know, and like I know who's driving, and like I don't know. I just am not a big fan of the bus.
The next category is community and social identity. So it kind of talks about what community looks like for you today. So whether that be church or just how you're connected socially to others, if it's more so family or friends.
Mm-hmm. More family. I'm connected more family and friends to some degree.
Like Yelena.
Yeah, I have friends that I like to walk with.
Right.
I'm not actively involved in any social clubs or anything like that. It just hasn't been something I've been interested in. Right. Although I've been saying since I retired, I want to do some volunteer work but I've never made the effort to do it. I've talked about it a lot, but talking and doing it's two different things.
Right. Okay, so we'll skip on to leadership and role models. So this says, who were the leaders or role models you admired as a child, and how did they influence your aspirations?
Well, definitely. I've kind of reviewed those things, teachers. When I was just a child. We had the same teachers for one teacher I had for 4 years, and the other one I had the next 4 years, and they were wonderful. Um, Stayed in touch with them, for years. As the first through the fourth grade teacher, she played the piano for almost every wedding in that little community, and her brother sang. So naturally, they played the piano and sang at my wedding. Um, oh yeah, Miss Elizabeth never married. And Mr. Fred married later in life, and they were a team. And she was wonderful. And the other teacher, Miss Moselle, we called her Moselle. They might say Moselle now, but she had a twin sister that also taught school, but I didn't have her ever. She was wonderful also. She was very strict with us, but she would let us go outside and study, which we did. We would question each other and all this kind of stuff. And I was always in the 4-H club when I was a child, and I was the public speaking. Gosh knows I'd love to talk, so. But that's different. Getting up in front of a crowd when you're 11 years old is very different. I was very emotional the first time I made a speech, but the other girl must have been hideous because I came in second and I was practically crying up there. So anyway, I did that, and they were just wonderful.
Yeah. And then the next one, it says, who do you see as current leaders in the community? So that could be local or national. And what qualities do they embody?
I just don't really go there. I don't, as I told my neighbor the other day, I don't discuss politics or religion. Yeah. And she proceeded to say that she didn't used to, but she'd gotten her head out of the sand, And I thought, well, my head's not in the sand. It's just that
it's just so complicated.
It's so complicated. Yeah. It really is. It's, we want the best for our country, but I think right now, it's disheartening to see what could or become the leader of our country. It's discouraging, and I don't know. Back in my day, your politicians and all that, they were just revered. They were, of course, I'm sure they were just as cloudy as they are now. But you didn't see it. All this communication. Communication's wonderful, but I think it's also detrimental in some ways. Bad.
Oh, okay.
Not bad, but
Yeah. And this question kind of goes along with that one, but it says, what actions do you believe leaders should take to improve our country's well-being and unity, if anything?
What do you think? I don't know. It's just, I think we probably, we've become so separate. We thought we were separate back in my day, but it's not the same separate. Mm-hmm. And it's just corny to say, but we need to just, realize that everyone's an individual. We all have opinions. It does, you don't even want to voice your opinion or say anything anymore because you don't know what this one or that one, hopefully I'm not offending you by anything I've said, but you don't know. You can say a word anymore. And I would just like to see everyone realize that we all want the same things. And I guess, but how we get there is so different anymore. And I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. I don't know. I wish I had a magic wand to wave over her and it would be easy. Because I don't see it being easier for our young people. No. I do not.
Izzy, these are questions for you. It says, who do you look up to the most in your life? And what about that person inspires you?
Okay, so cheesy, but this lady right here. I like, honestly, if my mom's gonna be watching this, I like talk to you stuff, but I like just, it's like different with you, and I like talk to you stuff, and like, you and Mama are like the most.
I'll look away. I'll look at Gracie.
Sorry. you and Mama are like the most like I don't know the word the most predominant women in my life, and you both have just been so important to me and like shaped me into the like young woman I am today. And sorry, I just don't know if you like were like not here. I like do not know like what kind of person I would be, because you've taught me so many like important life lessons and stuff that like with your old wise like thinking stuff. And yeah, sorry.
You're okay. You can take a minute if you need it. The next question kind of goes into that, what you were saying. It says, what's something your grandmother has taught you that you think is important?
So many things, just like like how to be like just like moral lessons and stuff. Like I'll talk to her about some of like the girl drama that I have and stuff. Thank you. And like obviously like when she was my age it was like a different time and stuff, like with all the technology and differences and stuff like that. But like she's really just she's still just giving me like advice and stuff, and it just like really helps.
I'll give you all this. Okay. If you need to hug it out, you can also do that too.
I'll hug you. I was there when they drug her out of her mother.
And with the green and red button on the phone.
That's right. My daughter had, oh God, her, when Isabel was born, her dad was in Afghanistan. So, of course, my husband and we were all there at the hospital, but I was in the room and didn't know how to operate. I had my little old what is it phone? Not Nicola, but anyway, one of those phones. Yeah. Everybody had one. Yeah. But Rachel had a different phone, and she's in here she was trying to have this baby and talk to her. He was calling all the time, and nothing was happening, and I was having to answer the phone. She kept saying, hit the red button to talk, and I thought the red button, but I'm arguing with her that, the red button's going to hang it up, Anyway, that's where the red and green button come into play. Technology, right?
Yes. So this next category is opening lines of communication across generations. So it says, what strategies do you use to communicate your experiences and values to your grandchildren?
Just talking to them, I try to be honest with them, just like I was talking about the segregation issue and all, and it was just, we were just because I was raised one way doesn't mean I was raised and it was ingrained. I opened my mind as I was exposed to other people. And I know I get off subject, but this kind of relates to that. When I was working in Memphis, I worked at a savings and loan, and some of the coworkers, I would hear them referring to our customers. They'd say, "Oh, the Jewish man," or "this Greek man." And I just wouldn't ask anything, But I was finally one day, I said to someone, I said, "How do you know the difference?" Mm-hmm. They look the same, because all I knew was black and white, to be different. And so I don't know how that plays into anything you're asking, but I think it goes around to saying, we're the same, And from my very, very small amount of experience and exposure, and the trip to Ecuador was wonderful. What I really believe in this entire world, people want to be with their families. They want to be able to provide for their families, and have a loving environment for their families, whether it's in the United States. I do think the immigration problem could be solved if the countries that these people are immigrating from were safe enough to raise their families and provide for their families. I don't think they want to, this is a dream to live in the United States, but I still think deep down people want to be where they're from.
Yeah.
You know, you just, I do believe that. And I try to communicate that to them, you know, that I think actually they're probably more accepting of diverse environments and so forth, and that's a good thing, you know. Um, I'm trying to be very accepting of anyone, you know. I realize that, you know, the more you're exposed to things, the more you realize. I'm not educated, but I do realize that I think that's what we want. You know, we're never going to look the same,
Right.
but we are in our hearts the same. You know, I think if I were to ask you, you'd say that your parents wanted that for you. I don't know where you were raised, you know. Um, I don't know. What was the question again?
It's okay. You kind of answered it. So the third question is, what do you think are some common misunderstandings between generations?
Ugh,
And you can answer this too.
Yeah.
Like,
You made a face.
okay, so like this is just like what I think. Like, I don't like personally believe this, but like I just feel like it's kind of like a stereotype. Like younger generations think that older generations like are like cannot use technology, whatever, whatsoever, and like just like kind of like just like, I don't know, like it's mean and just like just like I don't really know how to describe it, but just like not like sweet and I like this might not be true, but this is just how like I feel that like some like younger people think about like some older people. They just like think like wrongly, like or like differently, like I don't know.
Could I say?
Yeah, you
why
should.
they might think that? Because some of them end up being grumpy old men and women, and that's just. I mean, it's ridiculous because I go back to when I was working. It would never fail. You know, these grumpy old men and women, but men, but mostly. Here they are, retired. They've got the whole day ahead of them, and they're the ones stomping at the bits because they're having to wait in line for a minute. Um, I think maybe that goes back to your health. I was never maybe kind enough to give them credit for maybe not feeling good that day, but it would just be like, dude, you know, just chill out. I mean, I think that's where the young people, they see some of this grumpiness or this attitude from us as older people, and, you know, they think we're all that way. And I can understand why they think that, you know. But as far as the communication thing with the kids, I think you just need to, you don't necessarily have to, you don't want to go, oh, babe, you know that I couldn't do it in my day. You don't know how lucky you are and all that stuff. They don't live back in our day. They live now. You know, we need to accept now. I'm never going to be hopping on a computer or any of those things. I might one day. I don't know. Not never. It's a long time.
I taught you know how to work the remote now.
Well, kind of.
Step up.
Yeah, down, up, whatever. But it's just you know, I think conversation at home this week. A lot of these things. I told you my husband was like, oh, I can't believe. So I said, well, look over these if you want to call them questions. I said, why don't you look over these and what would you say or whatever. He looked them over and, oh, I don't think we need to do this, you know. So a couple of days later, he says, where are those questions you had? So we got them out, and we actually had probably half a day sitting there Monday or Tuesday discussing these things for himself, his situation. You know, I was asking him if he ever spent the night with his grandparents and that kind of thing. I only knew one set of grandparents because my father's family passed away when he was very young, left a house full of young kids, and they were raised by grandparents and whoever, you know. So I don't think my dad ever thought he'd live to be an old man, and he lived to be 94 and very functional, as was my mom up until they passed away, which made me very happy for them. I had a great childhood. I, you know, it was back in the country and all that, but it was, I don't know, freeing. I practically raised myself, and then I have a much younger brother. I have two brothers. I have a much younger brother that my mom went back to work when he was very, very young. So I'm talking weeks old. And I remember when he was not even 2 years old, taking him to the cotton field, and dragging him around. Didn't know how to take care of a kid, but somehow he survived and he's 66 years old now. So,
This is the last category, but it's wisdom, hopes, and future aspirations. So it says, reflecting on your life, what is one piece of advice you wish you had known when you were younger?
we talked about that at home quite a bit, and it was hard to define. I don't, I didn't get a lot of advice per se. They just, you know, they were supportive, but my folks, oh gosh, one piece of advice. Maybe that sometimes, even though things change a lot, they remain the same. We need to learn from our history. I don't think we need to forget it. Just like, as I was telling you, the way I was brought up in our families. But we always had respect for others, and even though they were different. And I think that's important.
And it could be advice you want to give to Izzy too.
Yeah, I just want her to be herself. That's so important. I think I'm always telling her. She went to Kings Island yesterday, and I texted her and I said, "Be Isfara Torres.
Isfara, you are Isfara.
You are Isfara Torres." And I had trouble with the confidence thing when I was young, or I thought I did. I look back and I think I was stronger than I realized. But I want for both these granddaughters and our grandson, I want them to be proud of themselves and try not to be influenced by your peers so much. It's
Right.
so much influence now, so much more than I had, and it's just not all good. And I want them to be able to recognize the good from the bad, which is saying a whole lot because you can go through life and be at my age and not do that. I do like to think I wear the rose-colored glasses. I'll admit I do. That means I don't really see the bad. I see the good.
Okay.
Not always, but sometimes things will be obviously Yankee, and I don't see that. And people say, "Trudy, don't you know that they're really doing such and such?" Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit naive.
And then you kind of touched on this, but it says, what are your hopes and dreams for your grandchildren and their future?
Yeah, I want them to be themselves, self-sufficient. Um, I want her to fulfill her dreams. If her dreams change, that's okay. Because when you're young, you have certain dreams. As you develop, you might change your dreams. I don't think she will. She wants to be a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Have since I was
Since she was 9 or 8, she was influenced by
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy. Hello? But that's okay too, whatever it takes. And her mother has made sure that she's been exposed to as much as she can be. I want the other two, I hope they get the opportunity to be whatever they want to be and be the best they can be. That's a whole big mouthful. None of us ever reach our full potential sometime, but and to realize that the path you start on may not be the path you end up on. Her mother's a classic example of that. We're so proud of her. I'm also proud of my son. She has, at the ripe old age of 54, just received her PhD here at the University of Louisville. And I won't even begin to tell her journey. It was not a straight path, believe me. She's always been, was always an excellent student, and she, graduated from UK with a degree in English, and she ended up with a PhD in
neuroscience at U of L.
Yeah, neuroscience at U of L. So it's totally different parts of your brain and all. But our son is a successful real estate agent here in town, and he's a very hands-on father. which that allows him to be. He's a good dad and tries to be better. I just came back from a vacation with those 3, 6 days. I was with this
6 days?
Yeah, I was with you for 16. She took care of me though, because her instructions were to take care of Mama. All I was worried about was getting through the Atlanta airport.
We found our way through the train.
We did.
The last question I have is, looking back, what are you most proud of in your life?
Oh my goodness, I guess my children. That's a typical answer, but it is. I'm really proud of both of them. My grandchildren would be second. Like I said, I was 64 before Isabara was even born, and so most people have a 20-year-old by that time, 20-year-old grandson or granddaughter. But I don't know, maybe it was at a time where I was more available, and so I've been really proud to be able to spend time with them. Practically, I had a discussion with my daughter today talking about how we want to spend every minute we can with the grandkids now, because we know that they're getting, she's developing a life now that doesn't include us, which is normal. And Harper and Henry will be doing the same thing. And as long as they want to come to the house and spend the night or the day, we're available. And I don't mean to make them such a priority that I don't have any other life, but maybe it is sometimes. But, I look forward to school starting, because I don't mind having a free day.
Yes.
But I love being on call. I love, if her mother needs us, because my daughter just started a full-time job because of this education she's gotten. And my son-in-law, we're so proud of him. Her dad is, she didn't mention him as a positive influence.
Oh,
but
yeah. Sorry, yeah.
He's a gentleman that is retired from 20 years in the military. He was in the Army for 20 years. He was
5 tours.
He was 5 tours of Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever. He was a combat soldier for all this time. First Sergeant Torres. We're really proud of him. He and his culture is...
It's different.
It's different from ours, but he's so loving with us, with Isfara. He has the opportunity to be with her. He works all the time, but not a job outside the house. It is.
Well,
it's outside.
It's like right next. We got 2 houses right next to each other. He's fixing it.
Yeah.
Every day he's over there.
He's such a hard worker. Yeah, he works, no matter what he's doing, he works hard at it. And I think that's an influence that he wants her to have. Is, you start it, you finish it, you work hard at what you're doing. And my husband always told both the kids, if they started to college, don't start unless you intend to finish. And they did. My son started late, but our daughter whizzed through UK, and then she proceeded to have a life in many directions.
Yoga.
Yeah.
And then?
So
that's all I have. Unless you have another story you want to share, but that's all the questions.
I don't know. You want to share anything? How was your Kings Island trip yesterday?
Oh, it was good. It was really good.
She was at Kings Island yesterday. My son and his daughter are at Kings Island today. My husband has the 9-year-old at home. He is this granddad that's loved these kids, but it's almost like he's afraid to be left alone with them, even at her age. Let's go pick up Isfara. Okay.
Let's play.
And let's this. But it's like, dude, you can do stuff. So we're seeing how, I think he and Henry are doing something today, which I'm so glad, because he's 9 years old. He's not gonna barf on you or anything. And I don't know, I think we covered everything. I appreciate you, Gracie. I hope maybe you'll get 2 minutes worth out of this.
Great, y'all did perfect.
Thinking about our conversation back in August, I thought, oh dear, I didn't give my mom and dad enough credit for influencing my life, which they were a great influence. But I did look over the video this morning before I came here, and I realized that I did have a lot to say. And a lot of it was about my parents. They were great. I feel like specifically I may not can mention things that I learned from them, but just their lifestyle, the generosity to their friends and the community is something that I hope I could emulate. And also, we moved away. My mother, who was a great grandmother, but she didn't have the opportunity to be with my children like she would have liked. But as we moved a little bit closer to them, when we moved to Kentucky, we were closer to Tennessee. She came as often as she could. She loved to visit us in Kentucky, and she even rode the Greyhound bus a couple of times up here because she didn't have anyone to drive her. And we had lots of fun. She loved to visit. She loved to be with my children. For a long time, we didn't have the grandchildren, but she was able to, she lived long enough to see Isvara and Harper, even Henry. He was maybe a year old when she passed away. So she got to enjoy them as much as possible. I just wanted to say that they were great parents, even though we were raised back in the rural countryside. I didn't have indoor plumbing until I was probably 14 years old. But we didn't know we were missing out on anything. My dad put up a 50-gallon barrel at the back of our smokehouse one summer, and we fill it with water in the mornings. And in the evenings, we could all take a shower back there, just exposed, and to the pasture. And also, I wanted to say that I feel like as a grandmother, I've learned a lot from my son and daughter because I think they're better parents than I was. I like to think that I was a good mom because I got to be at home with them. But I don't know if it was the timing or just my personality. I wanted my children to behave. I wanted them not to. I wanted them to behave when they were out and about and all this kind of stuff. And I realized that that's not the most, you do want your children to know how to act in public and around anyone, but that's not the most important thing. You want them to feel free. And I think mine did feel free. That was part of our issue. But so I've learned from my children how to be a better grandmother. I think I'm a better grandmother, I think, than I was mother. And I thank them for that because they've set the example for me. That's what I feel like. And that's probably the most, what I think I left out before.
Okay.
So,
Is there any other story you would like to add about your parents or like fond memories you have of them?
well, they loved it. When I was growing up, it was simple times and all that. I can remember when I was a little child, they loved to dance, and we would meet. They would meet. Of course, they brought the kids in anybody's house. One particular fond memory is this old house had an upstairs to it, and someone would have the guitar, somebody else the fiddle, that kind of thing, and they would just dance and square dance and all that, and the kids would just be slung against the wall. We would sleeping in the coats and all that. And one of my friends I grew up with, he likes to tell my husband that he slept with me before my husband did because we were asleep on the floor together when we were kids. So that's a running joke. They had a good time. They like to go out dancing and all. That's not their entire life, but they would do that. And there was a big group of friends. A lot of time in the summer, one of my memories, we'd go to one of the state parks nearby and cook out. I don't know, probably 6 or 7 families of us, and that would be our fun time. As I said before, we didn't all spend a lot of money. I can only remember one vacation that we ever had. And it was my mom and dad and my brother and myself. And this was before my younger brother came along. And another family, 3 others. So we're all 7 in one car. We drove down to Biloxi, Mississippi for the weekend or whatever. And I remember that very fondly. And just, it didn't take a lot to have a good time. You just, like I said, we sat on the porch and talked. You visited neighbors and family and all that. So,
Now, where are you from again? Sorry.
West Tennessee.
West Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
I remember that now.
The you know, it was a big thing back then. You visited your family. You know, you'd go spend the day with your aunt or uncle or something like that. You visited a lot. The I think I mentioned before, my dad's parents passed away when he was a child, so I never had that opportunity to meet them. But I did live in the same. I guess I was raised in the same house after when my dad's father died. It was the same house that all a bunch of kids lived in. We lived in that house for a long time, actually. And just, you know, my dad worked outside the home too. I mentioned that my mother did. Back in those days, in these little small farming communities, most of the families, you made your living off your little cotton and corn crop, which wasn't a lot. But my dad, he always supplemented our income by, when he was real young and all, he logged. And in those days, you didn't have the equipment that you have now. You had an axe and a mule.
Yeah.
And, you know, you cut the trees down, the mule drug the stuff out of the woods. And he did that for a long time. And he got a job at the shirt factory where my mom worked. And they had a car, and they would pick up women on the way to work. And they paid my dad, I don't know, a small amount each week. And it paid for his gas and everything. But he just, not everyone had a car in those days.
Yeah.
And certainly didn't have two like you do now.
Right.
Everybody has to have their own. So, and then he'd come in from work, from the factory, and if we were picking cotton, he'd come out in the field and work with us till, you know, it was dark, and then we'd go home, Mama would have supper done.
Yeah.
After she'd worked in the factory all day.
Yeah.
So, working people.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your mother cooking. Do you have any recipes or things like that that were passed
Oh,
to
yeah.
you? Yes.
Well, I can't cook it, but I love it. She could make the best caramel pie. That's one of my fondest, and caramel cake. As a matter of fact, anytime we had to take a cake somewhere, they always wanted my mom to bring this caramel cake. I thought that was the only thing the woman knew how to bake. You know, I was almost embarrassed by this caramel cake that she would always make. And when I was in high school, my home ec teacher asked for the recipe. And I thought, you just don't know what you're going to get. Because my mother was a pinch of this. And of course, when she sent the recipe to her, she really elaborated on all that. But, it was delicious. She made everything, of course, was from scratch. And then my mom smoked when she was young. Well, she smoked for a very long time. And one of the memories I have of her is she was, oh God, she's probably my age, because she stayed in the kitchen till she was probably 95. And she would have a cigarette in her mouth. Mm-hmm. You had to brown the sugar. You know, she would start it off in her little skillet. Meanwhile, she had her custard going over here. Mm-hmm. She's browning her sugar, because you have to brown the sugar and incorporate it into the custard to make it caramel, the color and all the taste. And she's got the cigarette just dangling from her mouth, but an ash never falls. Never falls. And I've seen her do that many times, and it's like, oh, wow. I never could master that. My daughter has made it. My sister-in-law can make it. I have the recipe. Mm-hmm. I've watched her make it. I guess I'm just not interested enough. I don't know. I'm not the cook she was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She is a great cook. And
now you mentioned them working at a shirt factory.
Mm-hmm.
So did they make your clothes, or did?
No, I didn't even know my mom could sew until I was about. Actually, it wasn't until I left home. I was maybe 19 or 20, and she got a sewing machine, and she made me 2 or 3 dresses for work, and she was an excellent seamstress. She sewed very neat, very well, but she didn't have time to sew. You know, she worked in this factory. She came home and took care of all of us, and she just didn't have time. Now her sister, who lived to be 101, she passed away in 2020. She ended up having COVID. Oh gosh, she was a real seamstress, like our my grandmother. Sister, we called her sister. Sister could just make anything. She was quite the perfectionist, almost to a fault. If I sew, but I just sew. Um, and if you ever show her something you've made, she could always, well, next time you might want to do such and such. It's okay, but I'm not going to. Anyway, now Mom was a good cook. Like I said, she cooked, never failed when I would go home. And in the last, after we moved to Kentucky, I went home frequently because, I could make that trip by myself pretty easy. And she would always have, we called it dinner, and dinner waiting for us when I got home. No matter what, it would be ready when I got there. So
now, do you still like go back and visit Tennessee
yeah.
they were?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I plan to go back in October. I only go back now maybe once a year because she's not there. My dad's not there.
Right.
My brothers are still there, and almost. My one brother is in their home, that one of their home houses that they moved out of. My younger brother just moved into town, which is about 5 miles away, but they're basically both there. My brothers take care of the cemetery. It's located next to this little Baptist church, but it's on the ground of where our school used to be that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And that school was there for many, many years. I think my dad went to school there.
Wow.
We have an outhouse at the school, 2 outhouses.
Wow.
The way you went.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest change to the town? Like in the last, I guess,
even 50 years,
yeah.
Because I've been away. As a matter of fact, we have our 55th anniversary in a couple of weeks. The influx of people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so many more people.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, when I grew up, there was only 5 or 6 families, and I could name them, but as sure as I start naming them, I'm going to leave one of them off. But that's all that was in this small little. We had a store and a cotton gin when I was growing up. The store just went out of business last year, and it had been there for forever and ever. There is a big store there now. So there was always this little community back when my dad was growing up. It was quite the hopping little place. But like you say, the change for me is just the influx of more people and different, as I said before, more diversified neighbors and all. It's pretty cool, yeah.
I don't think I have any more questions, but is there anything else you want to share?
Gosh, Gracie, you've been so generous with your time. I can't believe I did this. I don't think so. I just was worried I didn't give my parents enough credit. Just my family in general gave me a lot of credit, aunts and uncles. And as I said, I kind of raised myself because my mom and dad were at work, and I was just kind of out on my own. You could be that way back when I was a kid. And I could just go into anybody's house, and if they were eating lunch, I got lunch,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And I just am proud of my own children, and I'm proud of the way they're parenting their kids, and it makes me be a better grandmother. And I love time with all 3 of them. I didn't mean to emphasize Isabara more than Harper and Henry because, as my mom would say, I love them all the same. I was with her. I've been with all 3 of them. I'm so glad we're close by so I can be with them. It means a lot.
It's special.
Yes, it is special. I hope you have the same opportunity.
Thank you.